While this game takes many inspirations from They Are Billions, there are a couple of key differences. Set in a gritty, dark fantasy world, the undead are replaced by demonic creatures and similar heathens. With a fully voiced campaign mode as well as survival mode, it does not lack for content. Age of Darkness is a rare combination of RTS and RPG mechanics. This is pretty uncommon in the gaming scene. There are only a few games like Spellforce 3 which are out there. The Age of Darkness campaign delivers this unique mix really good by managing heroes and leveling up units during its expansive story missions. In survival mode, while it is more focused on the RTS mechanics, it still involves decisions like picking up artifacts and upgrading units over time, all the while expanding on the map and holding off the ongoing horde. The gameplay loop is solid. Keep pushing out with heroes and soldiers to explore the map while building up infrastructure and defenses back home. Enemies are more dangerous and aggressive at night, but you'll always be vastly outnumbered. It's a constant balance between expansion and survival, and for the most part, Age of Darkness manages this well. The economy is with buildings rather than with micromanaging villagers like in other RTS games such as Age of Empires. Overall, there is a solid foundation to work on. The gameplay and environmental design are well implemented, but some things need drastic improvement. The greatest problem is the pathfinding of units. This base defense game is a solid game and not the best in its genre, but worth a try. Super Fantasy Kingdoms is a wonderfully tense experience. It's a city builder, but it's also a wave-based survival game that is extremely stressful. At the bottom of the map, you reconstruct a village, placing buildings that process materials and using the materials to unlock and place new buildings where the whole thing repeats. Buildings need workers, and workers need homes. Placing roads gives you new plots of land to build on. It's a series of virtuous circles, and learning the points at which these circles intersect is part of the fun. Above all that, though, is a wilderness where enemies spawn, rushing to attack your village and being held off by the defensive units you've placed there. The game measures out its pace in days and nights, and at the end of every night you're told how many baddies your defenders killed and how many times your front line was breached. Every afternoon, monsters will attack your kingdom, and all of them must be defeated to progress to the next day. Once it becomes night, the monster will become enraged. Hit heroes will lose health points until they reach 0, at which point they become downed. In each run, you recruit a team out of over 100 units to defend your kingdom. Take advantage of synergies by arranging them properly and unlocking their passive abilities. After upgrading your unit enough, it can evolve into its ultimate form. Together with the hero you select and the items you manage to acquire, each run is unique. Thronefall providing a minimalist kingdom-building experience, though you'll still need to carefully plan and manage your resources to get through the waves of enemies that attack. Thronefall's gameplay is a mix of resource management, building up a kingdom, and tower defense. At the start of each map, of which there are 4, you're given a small amount of gold to build up your resources. You can spend the gold on things like houses, towers, mills, barracks, and archery ranges, with each of them providing different benefits. Houses and mills can provide gold, while towers provide defense. Each map is split into a day and night segment, each bookending the enemy waves. Daytime is when the construction happens, and you have to decide how to approach the situation. You're aware of what enemies will be attacking, apart from one occasion, so that also plays into what you build. Do you build houses so you have gold flowing in, or do you build up the defenses? The other option is upgrading what you have already, like the castle, which is the most important building you have. If that falls, then it's game over. The other consideration is how far you expand out. Too far and your forces could be stretched, while too compact and enemies can get closer to the castle easily. Whatever tactic you choose, you will find out at night if it works. This is not a passive experience where you watch the wave come in and let your defenses do all the work. As the leader, you're in the battle too, riding around on your horse and attacking enemies. You start with a bow and arrow, and later you unlock a spear and a sword. Just like the soldiers, the leader's weapons also have advantages and disadvantages. Each enemy wave gets tougher, building up to a final massive attack in the last wave on each of the maps. Thronefall may be a minimalist strategy title, but it is big in heart and has a lot of depth to it. It is a game that is simple to play, but will challenge you at every turn. What sets Cataclysmo apart is that it definitely has a story and some real world building work put into it. Fans of base defense games like They Are Billions should take note here, as it's a blend of that style of RTS base building and a more free-form defense crafting that allows a lot of creativity. Buildings like houses and gathering stockpiles are fixed-size objects, a traditional RTS base, and the units work just as you expect. But the blocks of your walls, towers, and traps are placed one by one with a remarkable degree of flexibility. You can make spiraling towers, defensive bastions, and more to maximize the strengths of your different unit types. Bowmen, for example, are strongest from a high place, while soldiers who toss explosive spiked balls are best up close where they can guarantee accuracy. Funneling the overwhelming hordes into crafted kill zones takes not just architectural skill, but an understanding of how to exploit the available terrain. What's most striking is how resources work. They're a constant flow, but capped in total storage. You're therefore really incentivized to spend them as they come in so that you can make as large and effective a defense as possible, only limited by how much time you have before the next sunset. Cataclysmo is a deep base bundling game with many opportunities to build and customize your defenses. For fans of They Are Billions, it is a game to keep in mind. Stranded Alien Dawn builds thoughtfully on the survival sims that came before it, keeping what works and streamlining what didn't. It all adds up to a classic story of human versus nature in which your survival depends on carving out a niche for yourself on a planet teeming with life. Stranded Alien Dawn is clearly a descendant of RimWorld, but Stranded's emphasis on alien wilderness survival through scientific discovery is incredibly refreshing after years of wading through a constant barrage of raider attacks, psychic magic, trading caravans, and the guilt of ignoring basically every distress call or resource mission that pops up. The long-term goals of each scenario also provide welcome narrative scaffolding for each playthrough. Stranded isn't quite so punishing a game, so you really need to pump up the difficulty, which determines your starting resources and how strong enemies are, and choose a challenging moon, which determines narrative pacing, if you want the alien ambushes to feel like anything more than a slightly chaotic welcome party. This base defense game has plenty to offer players looking to immerse themselves in the role of deep space survivalist. Its modular base building, one of the primary features touted on the developer's website, just works, allowing you to effortlessly create cozy cottages, multi-story buildings, and sprawling military complexes that fit seamlessly into the world. Most importantly, perhaps, the environments are not just beautiful window dressing in order to make the most of nature's abundance. You survivors need to set time aside not only to research technological advancements, but to closely observe every species of plant and animal they encounter. You can also explore more distant locales through hot air balloon expeditions that can net you additional resources or survivors. Together, these science-forward features contribute to a real sense of discovery, making the world feel jam-packed with things to do, even though, in reality, the slice of the planet available to you is actually rather small. The Last Spell is a really unique base defense game, which is a mix of They Are Billions and Final Fantasy Tactics. The Last Spell is a roguelite where you have to protect a small settlement from hordes of monsters. While there are certainly some tower defense elements, the vast majority of the monster slaying is going to come from a handful of randomly generated but customizable heroes. The catch is, the game is entirely turn-based. The Last Spell manages to capture the feel of a highly strategic and tactical game alongside the fast-paced and satisfying nature of a hack-and-slasher as you lay waste to several dozen enemies in a single turn. It makes your heroes feel like incredible badasses, yet it also has no problem reminding you of just how fragile they really are. The Last Spell plays out over a series of stages. The layout and boss are set in stone for each stage, but everything else is semi-random. There are two phases of the game: a production phase where you build new structures, buy gear, and set up defenses, and then a battle phase where you watch all of that hard work get mercilessly crushed under the stampede of 100 zombies. You have full control over the playstyles of your heroes and how they grow, and the system is quite deep. The trait system is important, but it serves to force you to adapt more than anything and helps prevent you from falling into familiar playstyle habits. The Last Spell's pacing isn't just contained within how the horde moves, but the way you control your own heroes. Each hero has a number of movement and action points per turn, and how you use them is completely freeform. You can move, perform an attack, then move and perform another attack, switch to another character and attack, then switch back to the first character and attack again, for example. As you succeed in fail runs, you will slowly unlock a variety of new weapons, buildings, and features. Some are unlocked by accomplishing specific feats, and others by spending the essence that you accumulate during each run. The last spell's difficulty results in a series of painful spikes rather than a gradual curve. The Riftbreaker is at once a survival sim, a base-building RTS, a tower defense game, and an action RPG. As the game progresses, you will research and develop new buildings and technology, with the ultimate goal being to the construction of the Riftgate itself. However, this wouldn't be an RTS if the entire planet wasn't working against you. At first, your primary worry is the encroaching swarm of canine-like aliens that you'll mow through without breaking a sweat. The countryside will be smeared with their well-stomped entrails as you construct strip mining facilities and storage centers to hoard minerals and plant matter and meat. Unfortunately, the alien life continues to get larger, harder to kill, and more aggressive as the days go by. You are constantly preparing for the next attack, frantically repairing damaged buildings and defenses. Quite often, you'll be given a 2-minute warning before an attack hits you. But in the later game, they'll often come from 2 or 3 fronts. The Riftbreaker has only 2 end states. You will either construct the gate, or your base will be destroyed in the process. Every time you die, you'll respawn at the headquarters, the only penalty being having to reclaim your guns. As long as that building survives every encounter, the rest is just a war of attrition. You'll build and improve defenses, and the planet will repeatedly try to kill you. If it's not alien swarms, it's the weather. High winds increase your turbine power, but low winds are no good. Heavy rain or nightfall renders your solar panels useless. Resources run dry, forcing you to relocate your harvesters, pushing you further and further afield. Meteor storms can be utterly devastating at any point in the playthrough. Each biome and all these effects are procedural, so you'll never know exactly what to expect. The Riftbreaker is a genuine challenge, though. One minute you're wading through floods of enemies with an 8-foot titanium broadsword and a flamethrower. The next, you're desperately trying to rebuild defenses before a meteor rain obliterates you. Stronghold is a real-time strategy game set in medieval England where players assume the role of a lord or king overseeing a county or kingdom. The primary objective usually involves developing massive medieval fortifications to defend against enemy attacks or serve as a staging ground for counteroffensives. Essentially, it's a castle simulation that blends elements from traditional real-time strategy games for combat with tycoon-like aspects, emphasizing the impact of building placement and production chains on the castle's economy. The game's charm lies in the myriad possibilities to create the castle of your dreams, incorporating modular walls, stairs, towers, siege equipment, tar-filled pitches, guard dogs, spikes, and more. Stronghold Definitive Edition brings 2 key updates to the table: new graphics and a fresh campaign. The original 2D sprites have been replaced by beautifully rendered new models. Stronghold Definitive Edition is all about quality of life improvements. Not only did the game get a massive facelift, but the control scheme was adapted for more modernized standards, with the possibility of always using the classic controls if you so choose. As for the new campaign, it is unapologetically hard and follows the difficulty curve the original campaign had set out. So, if you struggle to defeat the wolf in the last mission, the first of the new campaign will beat you into submission. It's a hard nut to crack, and one that is better enjoyed if you have already played the original to get your bearings on the game's mechanics. Unfortunately, the AI was not improved. So, units sometimes sitting around getting arrows flung at them. They also seem to have a particularly hard time dealing with moats. Stronghold, even nearly a quarter of a century later, still stands as a great strategy game that every enthusiast of the genre should at least once experience. Dwarf Fortress is entering a new age, shedding its text-based graphics for proper pixels and the basic modernity of native mouse support. Still inscrutable, still magnificent, Dwarf Fortress remains an incomparable treasure trove of procedural myth-making for those willing to delve its depths. At its most basic level, Dwarf Fortress is a settlement sim with base defending mechanics. It's up to you to establish a fortress capable of lasting the ages from the ground up or down in the typical dwarven fashion. At first, Dwarf Fortress can be deceptively simple. clunky to control maybe, but when you're marking out tunnels to mine and trees to chop, it seems easy enough. Within minutes, you're 3 menus deep, trying to parse labor details and work duties, assign administrative positions, designate burrows, organize stockpiles of food, gems, finished goods, and precious cave wheat ale. You're responsible for every component of your fledgling dwarven society, and there are a hell of a lot of components. Every inch of every room and hallway is one you told your dwarves to dig. If they grow a crop, you told them where to plant the seed. And if they're lost to any one of Dwarf Fortress's countless dangers, whether it's goblin hordes, wergazelles, or an accidental cave-in, it's because you failed to protect them. The absurd depth of this simulation gives Dwarf Fortress a frankly unreasonable amount of detail. It barely affects mechanical gameplay in any real way. But it doesn't need to. That ludicrous, near-pathological intricacy is what's kept me fascinated for over a decade. As ever, Dwarf Fortress is a game you have to meet more than halfway. It requires a voluntary buy-in, a willingness to teach yourself its rules, to take the abstract details of its generated world-building and craft your own mythology. But now, the first steps in exploring its depths are a little easier to take. If you're willing, it's an experience you won't match anywhere else. It takes a very special game to give you so much to learn, so many ways to do everything, that even after 1,000 hours of playtime, you still feel like a beginner. More than any other game, Factorio has so many little tiny extra features that after several hundred hours make you go. I suppose you could argue that it's not exactly a good thing that it takes hundreds of hours before you realize that there's an easier way of doing a thing. But if you know Factorio, you'd understand the tutorial does the best it can, but the game is so incredibly ambitious in scope, there's far, far too much to learn to fit it all into a tutorial. It's all about trying things out and discovering everything for yourself. Rather than building tools and structures yourself, you instead build processes. As a simple example, by Factorio's standards, you're going to need to produce electronics. This means you need the capability to mine and smelt metals, specifically iron and copper. In turn, this requires equipment for mining and smelting metals. You need to smelt copper ore into copper plate, turn copper plate into copper wire, and combine copper wire with iron plates to create basic electronic circuits. You could create a closed system that assembles those resources specifically for the circuits. Alternatively, you could create separate production chains specifically for those components, before transporting them to the assembler that produces circuits. In this way, Factorio's elaborate, open-ended, and utterly engrossing puzzle begins to spin its steel spiderweb through your skull. On and on Factorio goes, with you a mechanical Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole of automation. Eventually, your factory will become so elaborate that you'll forget what half your assembly lines are making. Factorio has a tower defense element, whereby your factory is attacked by ever-growing swarms of alien bugs. It adds significantly to the base building element, with lots of offensive and defensive weapons available for manufacture, ranging from shotguns and automatic turrets to flamethrowers and even atomic bombs. In this way, Factorio requires you to balance logistics and efficiency with protection.